Okay, I believe we are live on Facebook. Excellent. Hello, everyone. Here we are at our noon gathering um, of our discussion group on Swedenborg's work, New Jerusalem. We're getting close to the end. Our last session will be March 5th, so we're moving through things pretty quickly. And the last 2 weeks, we kind of dealt with Christian practices. We looked at baptism and the Holy Supper. And now these next 2 weeks, we're going to be exploring our eternal life, what it is to be eternal beings. And this week, we'll be focusing on resurrection kind of as a whole, life after death. And then next week, we'll be getting into heaven and hell. So today, I'm joined by Reverend Renée Machiniak. If you want to say hello, Renée.
Hello, everyone. I'm finally here. Sage has been recruiting me for a while. I'm sure a few others too.
Yes.
And it's just a joy to be here. I've just been feverishly typing most weeks,
Well,
and
it's been fun to have you involved in that way too.
but it's great to be here with Sage because I always feel a dynamism there, and it's good to be able to do that one-on-one with you, and then hear what other people are thinking and feeling. So,
Yeah, this has been a fun way to be together this year.
yeah.
And it's always special to be with you, Renée. We have a special bond since you helped me as a little fledgling intern during my seminary career get out there in the world. And so I always feel that deep connection with you. And I'm
Yeah.
excited to get into this topic today. And I was thinking about it. There's a lot to get into because it's a short chapter, but then Swedenborg, of course, says, but you can also read all of heaven and hell. He's written about
Yeah.
this all through his writings. So we can get into kind of any of that. But I think what I'll invite us to kind of keep our conversation focused on is just this fact of our eternal life. And we will try not to get too into the weeds of, well, what is the heavenly life or what is the hellish life? Because that's going to be next week. But what does this really very central offering that Swedenborg makes to affirm, to lift up and employ us to think of ourselves not as mortal beings, but as immortal beings. I was actually kind of struck by just the first number. I thought maybe I'd read it. And then Renée, if you want to comment on what you feel like this means to you.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, that first number, 223, he writes, "We are created in such a way that as far as our inner being is concerned, we cannot die. This is because we can believe in God and can also love God. So we can be joined to God by faith and love, and to be joined to God is to live forever." What
Mm.
does this what does this mean to you? What has this meant to you in your years of ordination and perhaps
Mm.
probably long before that? And yeah, where might you
Sure.
like to jump in, Renée?
Oh, so many thoughts,
Mm-hmm.
so many memories. But I'm speaking to you, Sage, as a fellow chaplain.
Mm-hmm.
I was a hospice chaplain before I was an oncology chaplain, and what it means to me, aside from the power of the doctrine itself, is that I see it play out in life all the time, and I see it even as a volunteer chaplain with cancer survivors. There is this life and this love that emanates from people who, to whatever degree, have faith in a loving God, especially when facing life and death. The whole topic is resurrection, and in particular, this is referring to the awakening of the person after the body is shed. But the power of that in our doctrine is that, when we're with the Lord, we have this sense of forever, this eternal. It's not just a belief, it's an experience. And so as a hospice chaplain or a cancer chaplain experiencing people pass away, there's actually an increase of energy. There's an increase of life that's happening when the body is fading. And it's palpable not just in the person and the soul going on, but the people around the dying.
Mhm.
And not just, I mean, my first love is to serve the congregation in Royal Oak. That's my number one love. I love it because I love to be with people through the seasons of life. I like to go through the regeneration process, sort of like the gaining of eternity slowly with people. But one thought that I had as I was reading this, and I was struck by the very first line to Sage, which is that we cannot die. And you know, we always hear in this world, the only thing that's certain is death and taxes. You know, well, take away death. I mean, if we're talking intellectually about it, I mean, there's still fear, there's still loss and grief, and there's a farewell involved. But he's starting out with this very strong statement that we cannot die. And what then immediately jumped to my mind is that, and he says, those who are conjoined or linked or grafted in with the Lord. My thought was maybe the truth is we have degrees of life in eternity, degrees of it, you know, based on the degree that we want to commit to it, the degree that we actually love the Lord, which means the qualities, really the qualities of the risen Lord. That's really where, if we love those qualities, there's eternity in that. But maybe we only, some people to some degree only partially love. So, but what's interesting is if you read through this chapter, what struck me is that you're there or you're not there, you know. And a little bit later, I want to bring out my heretic, and
Good.
I want to disagree with something.
Excellent. Excellent.
Yes,
I hope you will.
yes, which is partly why I chose this topic.
Okay, great.
Yes, but that's
But
not
you're
really.
not ready to go there yet. But we'll hold on. You'll hold
We'll
your heretic
wait.
for a minute.
Yeah,
I wanted to just make a comment on that first chapter, first paragraph too, that I've been
yeah.
holding this. What does this mean? So we've been born so that our inner being cannot die. And
Mm-hmm.
that this is because we can believe in God and love God and then be joined to God. And I've been
Mm-hmm.
bringing this up a lot over the course of the study. What does that actually mean? It doesn't mean professing the right words about God. It doesn't mean doing the right ritual. There's no earthly material way we can kind of prove that we have done that.
Yeah,
But maybe to me, what that means is the part of me that can't die is the part of me that's joined to God. The
yeah,
part of me that can't die is that the eternal light, the eternal spark that is my life that comes from God. And I know for me, like reading this chapter and thinking about resurrection, I mean, I too was a hospice chaplain, and I can I think that played out in that work, and I share that perception that sometimes right before death, people's energy rises. I know a lot of people who I spoke to while I was a hospice chaplain who were Swedenborgian were like, I guess it was Janie Lamole who was like, "Oh, how lucky you are that you get to be around all of those angels, all those
mm-hmm.
angels that are with people when they die." It's a moment to witness that the vibrancy of what our life actually is, and that it's not tied to this, it's not primarily this body. Um, but and I for me lately, I think what this idea of resurrection makes possible for me is it challenges me to think about what my eternal life really is.
Mm.
That it calls me to remember all the stuff that will fall away, that is in the process of falling away as I age and, get my own little aches and pains or whatever, the parts of me that are not eternal. And I
Mm-hmm.
think it's useful because sometimes I feel like when we think about the life after death or the way it's maybe been misused in our human history is like, we're going to live forever, so don't worry about a thing. It's all going to just go on forever. And I think there's something really powerful about facing the fact that we're going to die, that our physical bodies
Yes.
are going to die. so that it's not just this, we'll just go along forever, but to really wrestle with what are the parts of me that are going to die? And am I
Mhm.
giving my attention to things that are that are not actually eternally significant? And
Mhm.
can I pull back from that a little bit? And I feel like the doctrine of eternal life is an invitation to actually take death very seriously
Yes.
and to consider, yeah, to consider how we use our attention and how we spend our time, and are my priorities kind of focused on the part of me that has this deep forever life, or am I getting caught up in the minutia of wearing the right clothes or having a big house, all of the stuff of the material world that will end, that is not permanent. um, that's the way I've been holding it in terms of how it affects my kind of day-to-day life. And I guess that's a question for you. Do you feel
Mhm.
like thinking of yourself as an eternal being affects your day-to-day life? Is it something that comes up in your consciousness?
It does, partly because it's interesting. I'm going to add an aspect, which is the people I live with. My parents are in their 80s and their health is declining. And so it automatically, because I'm a giving and a selfish being, I'm both. I think about how I'm going to miss them, and then automatically, Sage, I think about me dying.
Mhm.
So I think about so there's two things I think about. One is what my dad said once. He said, if you want to know what eternity feels like, think about somebody you love very much and imagine not loving them. No, that love, imagine that love won't ever go out, like that spark you were talking about, that ember, that spark of love for one or more people that are the most close in your heart. You can't imagine not loving them ever. No matter what they do or what you do, you'll always love them. That's an experience in real time of eternal love. So that I live with every day. I live with that thought every day, that the love I feel for them or Joe or the people in my life, in my church, my brothers, their families. I think about and some of the, as you know, when you are a youth chaplain also, and it's like I've grown to love the youth in a way that will never die. And it's always fun to watch them grow and become, right? So there's this sense of eternal love because I experience it. And on the other flip side of that, day to day for me, is that there is something precious about every moment in the physical realm. And Swedenborg talks about the earth realm being the hardest of all the earths, if you will, or all of the areas or zones of experiencing as created beings. And he says that the earth realm is precious, it's hard. And so there is something unique that we're experiencing that won't be the same anywhere else. And
Mhm.
so I live with that every day because of my parents aging, and the preciousness of each day,
Mhm.
and how that's not going to be repeated. So soaking it in, and my a little bit of a temptation for me is to go to the sad zone, which is okay. I understand it, go to the sad zone of my heart. And so I just kind of like, out of sadness and anticipatory grief, I want to hold on. But just as, as hope is the thing with feathers that, you can't clutch. I can't clutch onto them or to anyone who might die.
Mhm.
So there's this sense of preciousness and wanting it to be free, letting the moment be free, not clutching, not
Mhm.
making it something. And then so you brought up, the materialism of the world and bigger house and more
Mhm.
stuff. So all of that can distract, me from wanting, to whether it's food, it's usually food that distracts me, but wanting to comfort the losing the preciousness of the moment. But there's something really important about having this temporary physical life.
Yeah. I love that you brought that up. I feel like that's so real and important and something that sometimes in church we miss because we're sort of so focused on eternity, or we're so focused on our highest self that we kind of, the church has historically kind of denigrated the physical form and said that it's,
Ah,
and I feel like that's a wrong we need to right because just like what you're saying, yeah, this is our one, we'll have, who knows what's going to happen next. Like we have this whole
yeah,
adventure ahead of us, that we
yeah,
can't even fathom. Swedenborg gave us some ideas about what he saw happening. Who knows what it's all going to be like. I mean, I trust and believe it will be in a grand adventure.
yeah.
And we have an adventure right now, and we have an adventure in this body and in these bodies. And I get that from Helen Keller a lot in a lot of her writings, just like not, when one door closes, another one opens. She has just such a
Mhm.
hopeful perspective, and she like digs so deeply into like her life. What is her body and her abilities and her mind and her heart making possible?
Mhm.
And I think that's such a gift that all of us, I want every person on the planet to kind of feel that and know that, um, and give their attention to their particular form instead of kind of, yeah, this isn't important. It'll be better later. Or if I,
Yeah.
wanting to be like others who we see as more holy,
Mm.
but really taking, what is this particular earth ride that we're on right now offering us? And I think there's a way to be like really embodied and like really in your physical form while also knowing you're an eternal being. And there's something very beautiful that happens when we can do both of those things
Mm.
at the same time. Yeah.
Well said. That's about the best I've heard it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that really is a reflection of how Jesus was both, and how important it was that the divine itself came into this wonderful and wretched body, both, the body that can be beaten, the body that can hunger, the body that can suffer. And there's something, like you say, beautiful about that. Yesterday I spent the day at the hospital. I got requested for this family that they don't come to the church, but I marry, bury, and baptize them just through a friend. And a 52-year-old female was just told that she has a multiple myeloma, which I don't know if people know, it's multiple cysts and cancerous tumors grow. It's a tough one in the cancer field, and she had just beaten down with chemo and radiation a bunch of tumors, and she was really hopeful. And then a tumor popped up, and a staph infection jumped on the tumor, and
Mhm.
so her prognosis is extremely poor.
Mhm.
And her brother, who's lost his wife, his mother, his niece, and now this is his sister. So
Mhm.
he's lost almost everybody in his life that he has loved deeply. And we talk about remembering, if we can experience eternity, it's the people we love the most. Well, he's about ready to lose the last person that he's loved the most. And he asked me, how do I handle this with her? And this is a long way to kind of comment on what you just said, but I said, but when my best friend was dying of a glioblastoma brain tumor, I had spent a lot of my time with her, giving her, trying to nourish her with hope doctrine, things that were in ordinary lay terms, very comforting words. But what really gave her peace, Sage, was when I flopped myself on her belly and cried. And I said, I don't want you to go. I don't, this life, I don't want this life without you.
Yeah.
And I'm going to miss you. And I don't know what to do with myself. And I just had to. God up in heaven in the top of my mind said, tell her how much you're going to miss her. And
Mhm.
so I did. I just wept, and I was physically on her body,
Mhm.
and she couldn't speak at that point. She was close to death. And so the only thing that could communicate were her eyes.
Mhm.
And whenever she needed something, her eyes would go to that spot, and I knew to pick it up and give it to her or whatever. But when I got done releasing all these feelings, I looked up at her, and she had poured a river out of her eyes, but she had the most peaceful,
Mhm.
calm look
Mhm.
on her face because somebody finally shared the truth
Mhm.
of
Mhm.
the moment. And it's anybody that would love her, if anybody, one of us did that, that would tell her that she mattered. And so there's a sense of, I think, when we're in time and space and we're grounded in the preciousness of this life. Now I totally believe there's another life, but there's something about being here right now in this grounded body and saying, this matters and you matter.
Yeah.
So yes, and I think what's interesting paradoxically is that heaven gets right in there when we do that, and that the eternal realm
Mhm.
uh, is able to flourish
Yeah.
when we're grounded. And
Yeah.
like you say, something beautiful happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great example. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's making me think of that scripture passage sort of. I'll just share the essence of it, like uh, well, the scripture passage and then also Swedenborg's kind of assertion over and over that we need to bring heaven into ourselves if we're going to enter heaven
Ah.
after we die. And so this is our time, this is our moment,
Mhm.
if we're treating this life as sort of just this practice run or something, and our real life will begin after we die, or if we're
Ah.
sort of not engaging our feelings about this life deeply because
Yeah.
we kind of hold on to this sort of theoretical idea of, well, I'm an eternal being and I shouldn't be bothered, sort of there's these ideals of like equanimity and
Mhm.
I can always sort of be peaceful. I really feel like that is that there's something else. There's another, and I think your example is showing that else, and that else is to be, yeah, having all the whole range of human experience, loss, fear, anger, s- you know, jealousy, boredom, everything
Yeah.
that comes up in our human experience, to let it all flow. I shared recently on Be Love this beautiful poem that was someone writing about peace and that and feeling, and he was sort of describing how his inner peace is
Mm.
movement. It's not a still pond. It's
Ah.
allowing the storms and the but it's allowing it to come in and then leave. And I think that you've been
Ah.
sort of touching on that you know part of how we try to control life is by
Mhm.
keeping certain feelings out and holding on desperately to feelings we really like and we want to keep on. But there's really, you know, that's the whole point of it being eternal beings, is that it allows you to realize everything else is not eternal. There's something in our essence that is eternal, but
Ah.
everything else is a stage, just it's constantly moving. Our bodies are constantly regenerating in terms of the the form that we take. And I think holding on to our eternal nature, for me, it allows me to honor all that is not eternal, and that actually in
Mm.
honoring myself as not eternal it allows me to be more flexible and fluid and allow things to go and thank them for, and to
Mm.
cry and to, yeah, sometimes our hope messages or I wonder about that sometimes in our church, like, or just as humans, that we I wonder if we want everything to sort of feel good.
Yeah.
And sometimes that can get in the way. Sometimes we need to just feel horrible
Yeah.
and be honest about that. And then we can move on. Then we can feel good. But when we're sort of like trying to make ourselves feel good, it always sort of feels like a little bit of a just a falsity, just like a trying to make things fit.
Mm.
Um, and the invitation of resurrection for me is that this life is going to keep flowing in all kinds of different ways. And so we might as well get used to it. We might as well, like, relax. Now that's sort of the image of surrender, is like, here we are, we're on this ride, we're not in control. We're not gonna, but we can be participants
Mm.
in the journey. Yeah, we have a couple comments on Facebook. Good to see lots of you joining us. Barb and Dory and Ralph, and Bob was making the comment that the material is what we have to have at this moment,
Uh,
but it doesn't define who we will be once we leave this realm.
mm.
We may have different bodies. And then Glenn Litchfield's joining us and just thanking us. So hi, Glenn. Yeah.
Well, as you were talking, I think of one of my favorite insights through clinical pastoral education, which definitely transitions into what we're doing, Sage, with our congregations. But it's probably the most important insight, other than one other one, which isn't on topic. But this one, I tell you, my supervisor said the job of a chaplain, a good chaplain, is to bring in the horizontal or earth plane, of the patient's experience. So this is what we're talking about: being grounded in the moment, in earth, where a person's at, where we're at, and creating the cross, which is the vertical intersection of the divine with the earthly experience, and allowing or midwifing that or facilitating that so that the person themselves can have the insight: where does the divine intersect with my actual experience?
Yeah.
And that's where the magic happens. That's where the healing happens. That's where insight happens. That's where the beauty that you were talking about, that beautiful thing that happens when we're grounded. And so if we let, like you're talking about, the movement of life, I mean, life's just going to constantly move forward, just constantly. Good and painful things are happening. But the task before all of us, because we're all brothers and sisters and leaders in some way or a form, not just ordained clergy or even not just licensed pastors, every one of us leads. How do we help each other and ourselves find the intersection of divinity with whatever it is we're actually experiencing? Not what we want to have happen, not what we're pretending. We don't want to be pretend Christians. We don't want to pretend that everything's okay. But what is actually happening in our feelings, in our lives? What are we choosing? And then seeing that intersect point, which is, ever since I saw this insight in chaplaincy, it's like, I love the cross now. When I used to see the cross, I used to think of only suffering.
Oh.
But really, this intersection of the eternal with the temporal is where the magic happens.
It's
Everything
beautiful.
good.
It's powerful. And having it show up in this image of suffering, I think is at the heart of it. Is that
Yep.
there's no experience we're going to have in this life where those two planes are not connecting, as
Exactly.
horrible as it may be.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's very central to the Christian faith, to our faith.
Mm-hmm.
And I one of the comments about eternity that's really changed for me is realizing, eternity doesn't just mean a long time. It's not just like for,
Yeah.
billion years. I think we think of eternity as like going on forever, but it's more about this intersection. It's more about when we're in those moments where we're fully embodied, we're fully present. Time becomes spacious. We're in like this.
I love
And
that.
that's the eternal moment. That the eternal moment is every moment. We're already there. Like, and in that
Yeah.
way, it's like we're already there. We're already in the spiritual world. We're already in that eternal moment, because it's every moment. It's and we get distracted from it. Like we're sort of like we've been built to forget about this eternal moment and to get caught up in our thinking and our planning and all of our. But I feel like part of the spiritual life is to be reminded and remember, to sort of come back to this moment. One of the one of my little tricks, which I don't know if I'll help other people, is sometimes I like to imagine that I'm a being from some other sphere. Maybe I didn't have a body, maybe I was just floating about in space, and all of a sudden I like beam into this body in this moment.
Ooh.
And
Oh,
I like to
that's
sort of like
interesting.
imagine like, okay, here, like sort of like quantum leap kind of thing. Like,
Yeah,
so here I
yeah.
am. And what would be my, would I
Ooh.
immediately kind of read all the news and decide it's all like worthless? Or would I be like, whoa, snow, what's that? Yeah, like I feel like there'd be this, it's a way to connect with that innocence that is so necessary to sort of be in the eternal moment of just like
Mm.
seeing the possibility, seeing the, and I mean, I think especially perhaps at this point in our human evolution where we have so we're so smart. We have so many books. We've been making up so many things, so many stories about who we are, who we're supposed to be, what we should be up to, and that can really actually limit our ability to have that sort of childlike attentiveness to, okay, well, sure, there's all that stuff, and then there's just me alive right now, talking to you, sitting in this chair, and I feel like those eternal moments, maybe we should talk a little bit about like, can we cause them? Like what helps us
Ah,
or what helps you to come back to those, to come back to the present moment and recognize kind of heaven now or the eternity now.
ah.
Do you feel like they're gifts? Can we choose them?
Hmm. Well, yeah,
People
both.
online too,
You know,
weigh in.
I'm gonna pull a sage and say both and.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or a Swedenborg.
Mhm.
And just say probably both and. I think there's a sense in which, to the degree we realize that we're not in control of the whole cosmos. In other words,
Isn't it hilarious that we have to realize that?
yeah,
We actually, it's true though. It's true that we
we
think we're in
have to
charge.
remind ourselves we are not God, and and that's okay that we trip up on
Yep.
that.
Yep.
I
Yep.
realize that this control. There is a very real sense in which I cannot manufacture or create there's times where I can't create the environment internally to create the kind of visitation from eternal presence that I'm seeking.
Yeah.
And there are times when I might be, I mean, quite literally, Sage, I might be reaching for a car door handle, going to the grocery store, and all of a sudden I'm blown away with something eternal. And I'm standing there just kind of like, wow.
Yeah.
And then I see everything differently in everyone. And every person in the grocery store is a precious child of God. And if somebody even looks at me, I'm going to smile and wave. So it's just, there's these moments that can't be, they're given.
Mhm.
And it's probably when I'm the most humble. And then there's times where I think it's totally worthwhile and a part of the spiritual discipline and practice to meditate and breathe and walk and clear. And I can create that, and I can create a space where the Eternal One visits in a new way or visits and refreshes, you
Yeah.
know. So I think it's both and. I think we can, and I think we must,
Yeah.
especially if we're seeking to be fishers of people, which was the message in the lectionary last week,
Mhm.
and we automatically become fishers of people, draw to the light when we live a life of practice and of seeking the eternal, and slowly that light shines,
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
know.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm so struck by the way everything reveals and conceals
Yeah.
God. I think that's so true. It's such a paradox. And I think that as
Huh.
a religious professional, like I'm
Yeah.
conscious of we build beautiful churches to reveal God so that we'll look up, and we've, there's humans have created so many forms, I think, with this
Yeah.
intention to make space for us to focus on really what really matters. And for many people, that has been useful. If they weren't coming to church on Sunday and they would just be in the grind of work and life, we've the church has played a role in offering that.
Mm.
And I am so also totally conscious of how some of those routines have, from because of my personality, actually concealed God, because I've
Mhm.
lived in this delusion that, well, if I'm seeking God and I will make my way one day once I
Yeah.
regenerate enough and overcome enough, thinking that it was thinking that
Oh.
that horizontal plane could be discovered in the vertical, or no, excuse me, thinking the vertical plane could be discovered in the horizontal plane. I think that's a very common confusion for spiritual seekers, and almost like a necessary confusion. Like that's sort of part of how it all works. And ultimately, I feel like I've started to discover the vertical plane only as I've realized that this search was sort of not, I was never going to get there, that the eternity was never going to arrive on the horizon, that it had to be found now. It had to be this presence that was always there with me, no matter what I was experiencing in the external realm. And I think that's a real challenge for us as religious professionals. How do
Mhm.
we, yeah, how do we invite people into this, while not making our ways or our processes kind of into idols. I
Yeah.
think Swedenborg is really inviting us to see that there's this, that it really is about how we live all the time. It's not any kind of one thing. But we
Mm.
don't want to get rid of all of our efforts because they're useful, but it's just sort of useful to a point.
Mm.
And
Yeah, you're stimulating a memory with George Dole,
okay.
and he said it's essential that we build a self before we give it away. Okay,
Mhm.
so the Sunday school, the ritual, the stories, more importantly, the relationships, the ordinary rhythm of church. So he and I were talking about how that helps to build a self, um, you know, in walls, if you will, in the walls of the church, in the walls of the structure of the stories and learning, being accountable to each other, a sense of commitment in relationship. All those things build a self. But the ultimate goal then, once all that's built, is to give it away. So I think perhaps where you're at spiritually is that giving away. That the necessity of that. It's like you don't want to, and we definitely need to have a structure of self before we can authentically give it away, and we don't want to destroy that, because then if we don't have that container, somebody on the chat had mentioned about, I think, the physical self containing or holding the
Yeah.
spirit of the
Yeah.
person, the soul. So we don't want to stop the structure,
Yeah.
because that helps people build
Yeah.
so that they can give it away. So we
Mhm.
get stuck in the construction of the self. Maybe we're too frozen in too much identified with the physical identity of
Mhm.
self and the physical structure of the church.
Mhm.
But there comes a time when, whoosh,
Yeah.
I think it more has to do with the risen Lord. It has to do with the movement where the divine feminine blows where it will.
Mhm.
The divine masculine and divine feminine now are moving as it will, and we must follow.
Mhm.
We can't like try to hold on to it and try to say, no, it used to be this way. Uh, it's saying, come with me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's both and again,
Mhm.
which is tough,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, and you're pointing to such a important part, I think, of this new Jerusalem, this new church that we're wandering towards, that really is articulating in my understanding what life is like after we do give it up.
Yeah.
What life is like after we do give up the self. Like, I mean, how are you going to get, once we're in the holy city and we're all the tribes of the world are in the holy city together, like we're gonna
Yes.
have to give something up
Yeah.
before we can go into that city, you know? And I think that's why the work of being the new church is so hard, is
Yeah.
it's really not, um it is the after, it's like building the afterlife, it's not about the
Yeah.
building up of this, but what happens once we give up ourselves, then what do we do? How do we build
Mhm.
community together? What does it look like? And I think we don't know, and that's okay. And
Mhm.
I maybe if we can do anything as believers in the new church or followers of the, is to be humble in our not knowing, and
Mhm.
but also to be faithful in our confidence in this that God could do something new, that God
Mhm.
could build a community that is new, that we don't even know how to build.
Yeah.
um and yeah, I think there's a lot of mystery in that, there's a lot of uncertainty in that. um but there's clues, this book is one of those clues, in that new life we'll understand that we're eternal beings, we'll understand that we have spiritual freedom to all the chapters have kind of pointed to what this new life can and will look like. And I don't know, I think we don't know, I think we've been talking a bit today about, like, we have these glimpses of that new life. I think I like to believe everyone is shown that to some degree.
Mhm.
And then when we get those sweet moments, maybe the best we can do is sort of be grateful for them, and then keep coming back, keep coming back to that holiness and that um, sense of peace and calling. And anyway,
Well,
yeah.
the thing, one of my highest values is uncertainty. I love
Yes,
that,
good.
that I'm uncertain of many things. And I think it's
Mhm.
very important that we all
Mhm.
don't land on total dead certainty on most anything. But I will say that I am sure that I'm certain that the most important aspect of the Lord's new church, or not, I don't want to confuse that with the denomination.
Sure.
I'm certain that that there must be charity. Love and charity are at the heart of
Yeah.
whatever it is that is evolving now for the new church,
Yeah.
to as it continues to descend.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that, and reading in this chapter, everything
Mhm.
has to do with our will and loving what the Lord is about,
Mhm.
loving the Lord as life itself, as love itself, moving
Mhm.
through this unfathomable wisdom. But
Mhm.
I focus on the love right now because
Yeah.
that has to be, I'm certain and I'm rarely confident saying certain, but I'm certain that love and charity from God must be at the center of what we're doing, which is fits be love.
Yes.
It fits your new program, which is why I love
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Love has to be at the core.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and because if we don't love what heaven is,
Yeah.
we're not open to it. I remember George, another great wisdom that he said is that at the end of all of our lives, no matter where in the world we've lived, no what religion we've adhered to, he said at the end of all of our lives, the only thing that matters. Now he's doing this from Swedenborg now.
Mhm.
The only thing that matters is if we're open and if we feel any degree of need for the Lord, or another way to say it, the divine one,
Mhm.
the risen one, the
Mhm.
holy one, the one, if we feel any degree of need for the one and all that that means, then that's what matters. And if our doctrine and life gets us there, it's good.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
we don't like, and I'm preaching to the choir here, but we don't need to worry so much about one's doctrine. Although for me, our doctrine is my life. It gives me vision, it gives me meaning and hope and all that. But yeah, so a Muslim or a Jewish person,
Mhm.
a Jain,
Mhm.
so if it gets us to the point where when we die, we know we need something good,
Mhm.
something of love, then we're okay,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
But that is critical. That is a certainty in his doctrine.
Yeah.
That is
Having
that
that,
is what eternal.
yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe a way I might describe that being turned towards God or to a need of God is maybe on a very simple level is like love, like
Mhm.
having a movement of love towards all that is, towards this, towards
Mhm.
the Lord, whatever word you might want to use.
Yeah.
I've been writing about this a bit lately, where I'm starting to suspect that the only thing that really is true is love. That like when I look at my life and the choices I've made and the things that I've done, that nothing that has had any meaning and purpose and has has come out of my giant brain, has come out of like my planning. It's all come out of just this, yeah, this love, this, which isn't mine, which kind of
Mhm.
flows from some other place, and
Ooh.
yeah, and which sort of brings me back to kind of what we were talking about at the beginning of our conversation around
Yeah.
this life, these bodies, the feelings, the thoughts, the experiences of being who we are. I think another from my perspective, another reason that paying attention to all of that and honoring that and seeing that as used in a holy ground is so important is because we don't quite know what the new church is going to be like. We don't quite know what that all how that's all going to be arranged, how
Yeah.
we're going to live together, how we're going to organize ourselves. That's all to be determined. In my belief, the only way to learn or be guided to participate in that new life is through really engaging my own life, is through
Yeah.
my own wrestling with my own experiences. And when I feel, if I'm feeling, and I feel like there's a lot of really great research coming out around, people are studying emotion and studying, internal family systems. I don't know if people are familiar with that, but it's this fascinating study around all the different parts of me, all the different voices inside, and one of the ethics of this kind of psychological inquiry is that it's all useful.
Mhm.
Even the worst parts of me that sometimes do things that
Yes.
other parts of me want to say, stop that, that
Hmm.
every single part is actually trying to protect me, be, and that as we come to know them and because we come to understand, as we come to love those parts of ourselves, listen, we can heal and we can grow. And I think that's the laboratory for the new church. That's the place where we are coming to understand how we might not just practice our faith at certain times,
Yeah.
live our faith
Yeah.
all the time, which is really perhaps the primary way I would define the new church. Is it's it's faith, it's worship is life. It's having not that every minute is perfect or we're always doing one, holy posture in every moment, but that
Right.
whatever's going on, whatever's flowing through our life, we have an attitude of reverence for. And
Hmm.
I think it's possible. I feel like it's becoming true for me more and more. And I'm not like holy now and people should worship me, but it's possible for all of us to begin to have that sense of reverence for all of life. And I don't think it's so unattainable. Like I'm starting to feel like the new church is like, yeah, we don't quite know what it is, but like maybe it's going to start to show up, and maybe it already is showing up,
Maybe it is.
in
Hmm.
ways that we can't always see or define.
Yeah, as you're talking, I'm just getting this experience. I'm having an experience with you that, it is happening,
Yeah.
and we don't need to always understand everything. I know that's our temptation back in the Garden of Eden. That was the first temptation, was that we know everything. Good Lord. I mean, I think that is like the hardest thing to overcome, but it is happening. And what's interesting is that all of the things that we do in life are painful and difficult and destructive choices, and our heavenly choices, our charitable choices, all of that will be used if our overarching intention is to seek what is good and to live what is good. So, I mean, we are a mess, and that mess is so I'm in the first full chapter in our reading for today. I was struck by, it says, the internal, which is called our spirit, is adapted to uses in the spiritual world. So I get this feeling, Sage, that there are as many uses for everything we experience in this earth
Mhm.
that we can't even count. I think everything that we go through, the Lord can use
Yeah.
and does use.
Yeah.
And we have a very little bit of sight as to what actually comes of our lives. But if we were to look back, which maybe someday we will, and
Mhm.
see the ripple effect of everything, including, last night I was at a Lions Club meeting, and we had a guest speaker, a man who's the chef at this restaurant we go to every month to have our meetings. And he was our guest speaker. His children, all three of his children, were born with vision and cognitive issues.
Mhm.
And he said two of them were twins, and one was older. And he went through his whole journey with how the Lions Club helped the family when they had no money to pay for the rehabilitation of his young babies. And at the very end of his talk, he said, and I have to tell you that this is year 15 being sober for me today.
Mhm.
And so immediately everybody took a breath, and we understood that this man is on a really important path,
Mhm.
and he's healing and recovering, and he's seeing the good that community does for his little family.
Mhm.
And so then he blesses us with his truth of recovery. And who knows in the room who is also there. So the reason I tell this story is that his life, as expressed by him, was a mess and still is a mess. But now he's helping the Lions, and the Lions are helping him. And now many more people will be helped. So there's this sense in which the Lord adapts. This is the statement. He adapts everything to use. And I just think, how can we not ultimately, even in our mess, how can we not be hopeful?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, we must be hopeful. And that's I mean, it's bringing to mind, the grand human, or the idea that we all have a particular use. We're all cells of one larger organism. And I
Mhm.
think, I know for myself, I carried for a long time this idea that, yes, I'm one cell in that larger organism, and it's up to me to figure
Ah,
out what my job is. And I
sure.
can't start to act until I have it all sorted out. And
Right.
it was letting go of that belief that
Sure.
helped me to start to say, yeah, I got no idea, but here I
Mm.
am, and I'm just going to do my best today.
Mm.
And thank God, because, like, how could I ever possibly know I think that that desire to sort of have it all figured out is that desire for control, to know, like
Yeah.
you pointed
Yeah.
out, it's in us all.
Yes.
And maybe to a point it's useful, I mean, certainly I think there's a use for our intellect,
Mhm.
but it has to be in service to our heart. It has to be
Yes.
in service to
Yeah.
the heart that is actually running the show. It's the heart that wants that loves, and that needs to bring the intellect along, to
Mm.
serve with it. And yeah, it feel like the further I go, like, it feels messier. It feels
Yeah.
way
Yeah.
more uncertain. It feels
Yes.
scary. I feel like I'm experiencing fear much more than I have ever before, but
Mhm.
it's also excitement. It's like energy, like that I think was sort of being controlled for a long time. And
Wow.
I think that is part of what's necessary. It's sort of like the body of God is fine. It's
Mhm.
all messy and somehow it's connecting together and probably also needs a lot of healing right now, because our intellects kind of have grown too big and
Yeah.
we've been sort of living at odds with each other. But I think it's helpful for me to believe that even though that's true, you know, the earth is still spinning around the sun. Like some things are still
Yeah.
kind of going as they as they should. Like there's a lot of things that are not going as they should. And we have a lot of ideas about why that is, but we also can see that the earth can heal itself, that the body can heal itself, that there's and that healing is not going to come because we're going to come up with the master plan of how to heal it all,
Yeah.
but it's going to happen as we give up a lot of our master plans and kind
Mm.
of allow and show up to each other.
And the thought that comes to me is you're loving yourself by letting yourself be not in control.
Yeah.
That's a form of you loving yourself. The other thing I wanted to say in concert with your thought is that my supervisor used to say in clinical work, used to say that we have a bunch of Christians walking around with heads, just a bunch of heads walking around because we're just heads. We're just all in love with our heads. And we
Mhm.
need to get to the heart.
Mhm. Yeah.
That's where really the risen Lord lives, is in the heart. I
Mhm.
wanted to just say a couple things before. I know we're
Yep.
almost close to.
Yeah.
I was struck also a little later, but still kind of early, like the first part of the reading, which is that he says, all memory, thought, and affection from this world remain in the next world,
Mhm.
which I thought was is something that I used to say to memory patients especially cancer patients or hospice patients who were losing their memory. And I just had instinctively, but now I'm reading it here.
Mhm.
Instinctively, I just knew, God is holding our memories. They're
Mhm.
not going anywhere.
Mhm.
We don't have access to them because our brain is sick
Yeah.
for some reason.
Mhm.
But what I loved, it just kind of affirmed my intuitive sense working with people that we don't need to worry. It's in God's bank, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's got us.
We don't
She's
have to Instagram every moment so that it's
yeah.
recorded for all eternity. So before we
Yeah.
do only have 3 minutes, and you are going to
Yeah.
be a heretic. Are you able to do
Yes.
that in 3 minutes or?
Yes, I can do my very best. So at the
Okay.
very end of our reading today on resurrection, Swedenborg says that a person's life cannot change after death.
Yeah.
It remains such. If we have an infernal love of self only and of the world, that remains. And that's where we want to be, hell. And if we have a love of the Lord or God, the divine one, and of others, the neighbor, then we're forever there.
Mhm.
Um, and he quotes Abraham's words addressed to the rich man in hell. Between you and us, there is a great gulf, so that those who would pass from hence to you cannot, neither can these pass to us that would come from them. So I just, I disagree on this one
Yeah.
as a heretic, and I stand firm. I fight my father and my brother.
Yeah.
I believe that love never ends. I believe that love never stops striving to change and bless. And as a final note, I even believe that those in the lowest hells, just by virtue of the fact that they exist, have a place of love that makes them exist. Even though it's a twisted love in its most of its layers in the psyche of someone in a hellish state, there
Mhm.
still has to be at the core of every existing being, there has to be a glow of life and love from the divine that keeps us alive. And so I just have this belief that is not Swedenborgian,
Mhm.
that even eternity and eons later on the next life, that maybe perhaps souls would get tired of the darkness
Yeah.
and maybe would have some sort of quiet yet significant longing for something different.
Yeah.
And I don't know why I believe this, but it's a big part of me.
Yeah.
So as a heretic, I say, I'm not sure, Swedenborg, but that's okay. I'm not
It's
saying I
totally
know
okay.
this,
It's beautiful, Renee. Thank you. And Ralph agrees with you online.
Oh,
And
Ralph.
actually, yeah, Andrew Dole, George Dole's son, gave a lecture about this once because he sort of
Oh,
studied the scripture. And he actually thinks Swedenborg, he contradicts himself. Sometimes he does say that certain, and this will be a good carryover into next week when we talk about heaven and hell.
mhm.
And then maybe I would just go over 1 minute by adding one last thing where I wonder, I don't have this, but I wonder if in the work of as we heal ourselves, as we become aware of the things in us, the voices in us, and I really wonder if some of the voices that happen in us are spiritual beings, in another
Yeah,
realm
yeah.
that are communicating with us.
Mhm.
And as I love that part of me that gets very angry or controlling, I wonder if I'm helping that little soul
Oh,
on the other realm to make their way
oh,
to heaven. Um,
oh, interesting. Oh,
Maybe
I
we'll talk
love.
about that more next week. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, oh, no, I just love that.
Okay, good. This has been really good, Renee. So good to
Yeah,
connect with you and good to be
yeah.
with everybody online. And please join us next week as we really continue a lot of these themes in our discussion of heaven and hell as eternal states, and also certainly as states that we experience here in this life. Thank you so much, everybody. Take care.
Bye.
Bye, Renee. Thanks so
Bye-bye.
much.
You bet.